Pornhub was never simply a website where people consumed adult content. For years, it was the nerve center of a much more complex corporate operation called MindGeek, later restructured under the name ALO after its acquisition in March 2023 by Ethical Capital Partners for $400 million. $400 million for a company that distributed most of its content for free. That's not coincidence. It's strategic design. And understanding how that design worked is understanding how digital power is built around something that officially nobody wants to admit they consume but that hundreds of millions visit every month without fail. During its peak, MindGeek didn't operate a single website. It consolidated a complete portfolio that included Pornhub, YouPorn, RedTube, Brazzers, and dozens of additional properties. It didn't compete in a niche. It consolidated the entire market. Unlike traditional technology platforms that position themselves as innovative or aspirational, this model operated under a completely different logic. Capture inevitable traffic and organize it as efficiently as possible. The content itself was never the true strategic asset. The real asset was the massive volume of visits. At its peak before regulatory crises, Pornhub registered figures ranging between 100 and 115 million daily visits according to data from different periods. By August 2025, Pornhub still led globally with approximately 4 billion monthly visits, widely surpassing any competitor. That's not a marginal niche website. That's cultural infrastructure operating at planetary scale. And behind that scale existed a perfectly calibrated economic machine. The economic model seemed simple on the surface but was extraordinarily complex in execution. Much of the content visible to users was completely free. The average user paid absolutely nothing to access. Main revenue came from three complementary sources: massive advertising directed at millions of daily visitors, premium memberships that eliminated ads and offered exclusive content, and direct agreements with professional content producers. But the true structural differential that separated MindGeek from any competitor was something much deeper: total vertical integration. MindGeek didn't just distribute third-party content. It also produced its own content through internal studios. It technically hosted everything on proprietary servers. It monetized every click. And it completely controlled the technology behind streaming and delivery. It controlled incoming traffic and controlled how that traffic was monetized at every stage. That combination reduces dependency on third parties and dramatically increases operating margins. While platforms like Netflix literally invested thousands of millions of dollars producing expensive original content to attract and retain paying subscribers, Pornhub operated under a radically different hybrid logic. A strategic combination of content massively generated by common users, professional studios associated through commercial agreements, and limited but strategic internal production. The average cost per minute of content in this model was dramatically lower than that of any traditional entertainment platform. However, the absolute volume of aggregate consumption was comparable or even superior in total accumulated time. From a strictly financial and operational standpoint, that represents economic efficiency in its purest and most scalable form. The system didn't need to produce expensive content. It only needed to efficiently organize existing content and channel it toward massive audiences. But the truly critical point of the complete model didn't reside solely in content or isolated traffic. It resided in something much more fundamental and fragile: absolute control of the payment system. For years, adult platforms faced systematic blockages and severe restrictions from traditional financial processors that operate global banking infrastructure. Visa and Mastercard, the two dominant networks that process the vast majority of digital payments worldwide, suspended commercial relationships with MindGeek at strategically critical moments after massive public controversies and pressure from activists and regulators. And that's exactly where the complete business model reveals its deepest and most insurmountable structural vulnerability. It doesn't matter how much massive traffic you control. It doesn't matter how many hundreds of millions of people visit your platform monthly. If you can't convert that traffic into real and stable financial flow, power is illusory. Total dependence on external banking infrastructure controlled by third parties brutally demonstrated that real power was never completely within the closed ecosystem. But before reaching that final collapse, the conglomerate had achieved an almost monopolistic market dominance position difficult to match. MindGeek concentrated, according to conservative estimates, an absolutely significant portion of the global online adult content market. The strategic logic was exactly identical to Facebook acquiring Instagram to eliminate future competition or Google buying YouTube to control video. Instead of competing frontally in price wars or expensive innovation, you simply consolidated by buying direct competitors. The average user could naively think they were navigating completely different and independent websites. In reality, they were circulating within the same centrally controlled closed corporate system. That concentration generates bargaining power with advertisers, control over prices, capacity to mold consumption trends, and almost insurmountable entry barriers for small new competitors. From the pure standpoint of operating margins, digital adult content has a fundamental structural advantage over practically any other traditional entertainment sector. Constant and absolutely demographically transversal demand. It doesn't depend on specific seasons of the year. It doesn't depend on expensive planned releases. It doesn't depend on unique events. Consumption is recurrent, global, and statistically predictable. That generates extraordinary stability in traffic flows. And stable, massive digital traffic is the most solid possible foundation for building profitable advertising models and premium subscription programs. Even with relatively low conversion rates toward paid plans, the absolute volume of free users completely compensates, generating massive advertising revenue. The conglomerate also understood something absolutely essential about the modern digital environment that many traditional competitors never comprehended. SEO, search engine optimization, is direct economic power. For complete year's searches related to any type of adult content, systematically and automatically positioned MindGeek platforms in the first global Google results. That doesn't happen by coincidence or neutral algorithms. It's deliberate technical positioning architecture. In massive digital markets, whoever controls the initial entry door completely controls the subsequent internal economy. The real economic battle isn't for the individual video. It's for capturing the user's first click before they even know exactly what they're looking for. However, the truly devastating strategic turn occurred when external public pressure and indirect regulation began to escalate out of control. Serious and verifiable accusations about non-consensual content and systematic failures in moderation processes provoked formal investigations and coordinated financial blockages. Mastercard and Visa completely suspended payment processing at critical moments. That doesn't only impact abstract corporate reputation. It directly and immediately impacts real operational cash flow. And when cash flow is abruptly interrupted, even a digital giant with thousands of millions of monthly visits feels immediate and devastating financial pressure. The corporate response was a massive and unprecedented purge of unverified content. Millions of videos, literally millions, permanently eliminated in a matter of days during December 2020. From a purely financial and operational perspective, that meant dramatically reducing available inventory to protect the residual monetization capacity of remaining verified content. It's a brutally clear example of how indirect regulation executed strategically through the private financial system can reconfigure a complete digital model without any need for formal direct governmental prohibitions. Real power wasn't exercised by governments. It was exercised by two private companies controlling payment infrastructure. In March 2023, MindGeek was finally acquired by Ethical Capital Partners, a Canadian investment fund with publicly declared focus on corporate governance and strict regulatory compliance. That strategic movement was much more than a simple cosmetic change of owners. It was a deliberate and calculated attempt to completely reconfigure the public corporate narrative. When a digital asset generates constant massive cash flow but simultaneously faces extremely high reputational risk, the rational economic solution isn't to close it and lose the value. It's to completely restructure it under new professional management and adjust all visible operational protocols. In August 2023, MindGeek was formally renamed ALO in an effort to symbolically distance itself from past controversies and build a renewed corporate identity. The acquisition price, according to leaked legal documents in subsequent judicial proceedings, was $400 million. 400 million. That figure is revealing for multiple strategic reasons. It's considerably lower than the 525 million another investment group had offered in 2021 when the company still didn't face the level of subsequent reputational crisis. The reduction in valuation directly reflects the real economic impact of loss of payment processing and accumulated regulatory pressure. However, it's still a massive sum that confirms that even under extreme pressure, the asset maintains substantial economic value based on its capacity to generate massive recurrent traffic. From a purely business and strategic standpoint, the complete case of Pornhub and MindGeek demonstrates three fundamental structural principles of modern digital power. First, massive recurrent human attention always eventually finds forms of sustainable monetization even in culturally stigmatized or controversial sectors. Second, vertical integration dramatically amplifies operating margins but simultaneously increases regulatory risk and dependency on critical external infrastructure. Third, and this is most important, the true structural bottleneck of modern digital power isn't traffic itself. It's the external banking financial infrastructure that allows converting that traffic into real usable money. Without access to that infrastructure, power instantly evaporates regardless of how many people visit your platform. What's truly interesting from a business model analysis perspective is that this system doesn't depend absolutely on any corporate glamour or visible aspirational brand construction. In fact, it strategically operates better in the economic shadow. It doesn't need visible public celebrity or heroic media narrative. It functions efficiently because it satisfies a constant universal human demand and uses extraordinarily efficient digital distribution technology. It's fundamentally a data capture and analysis company as much as a content distribution one. Every individual click, every specific search, every exact second of viewing is extremely valuable and commercially usable behavioral information. And here appears the truly uncomfortable structural component that very few analyses mention. When a digital platform literally concentrates hundreds of millions of monthly global visits in a culturally sensitive and psychologically relevant sector, it doesn't just passively control a commercial market. It actively influences complex patterns of human behavior at massive scale. Internal algorithms completely determine what specific content receives priority visibility. Artificially prioritized categories progressively mold aggregate consumption patterns. What superficially seems like simple passive entertainment is simultaneously a sophisticated system of algorithmic curation with profound and measurable cumulative social and psychological effects. But financially speaking, with total analytical coldness, the fundamental economic core remains exactly the same. Massive recurrent human traffic multiplied by technically efficient monetization minus systematically optimized operating costs. That simple mathematical equation is what allowed sustaining revenues conservatively estimated in hundreds of millions of dollars annually, even operating under severe constant regulatory pressure. It's not magic. It's not luck. It's simply brutal operational scale applied efficiently. The complete Pornhub case isn't an isolated digital accident or inexplicable anomaly. It's a perfectly clear example of how internet allowed consolidating historically fragmented industries under extremely efficient centralized corporate structures. Before massive digitization, adult content was chaotically distributed in expensive physical formats and thousands of small independent producers. Complete digitization allowed total centralization, dramatic reduction of transactional friction, and absolutely immediate global expansion. The strategically relevant question for any serious analysis isn't whether the specific content is morally controversial or socially acceptable. That's a legitimate cultural question, but separate. The real analytical question is what structural lessons this economic model teaches us about modern digital power construction. It clearly teaches that any market with constant human demand and high historical transactional friction can be digitally reorganized to capture massive value in centralized form. It teaches that real economic power isn't always located in the visible corporate brand, but frequently in the company that silently controls the technological and financial operational infrastructure behind the user's visible experience. It teaches that even apparently absolute dominance of massive traffic has insurmountable structural limits when you depend on critical external infrastructure controlled by third parties who can close access. And here comes the strategic closure that really matters. Pornhub as a case study isn't interesting for what it literally shows on screen to end users. It's profoundly interesting for what it structurally demonstrates outside of it about modern digital power architecture. It empirically demonstrates that in contemporary digital economy, the fundamental economic asset isn't the visible product being distributed. It's the constant massive flow of human behavior captured, organized, and converted into monetizable data. If you can capture that behavioral flow, technically organize it efficiently, and systematically monetize it, you build real structural power. If you additionally manage to vertically integrate production, technological distribution, and data analysis, you dramatically reduce external competition. But if you fundamentally depend on banking financial infrastructure externally controlled by third parties, your power will always have an absolute insurmountable limit. MindGeek's collapse didn't occur from lack of traffic. It occurred when it lost access to the infrastructure that converted that traffic into real money. The true final lesson isn't moral or cultural. It's strictly strategic and transferable. Sustainable digital power doesn't belong to whoever generates visible content or accumulates massive audiences. It structurally belongs to whoever controls the complete architecture that converts human behavior into sustainable revenues and whoever maintains guaranteed access to critical financial infrastructure. And the final uncomfortable question that closes everything is this. If a culturally stigmatized industry could build a global infrastructure of attention capture and massive monetization with this technical efficiency, what other apparently respectable industries are doing exactly the same thing right now without you consciously noticing? Because the structural model didn't start with Pornhub. And it definitely doesn't end there. If this type of analysis about invisible digital architectures gives you a different perspective, consider subscribing. Every week we break down the real economic systems behind phenomena everyone knows but few structurally understand. Digital power doesn't belong to whoever accumulates audiences. It belongs to whoever controls the infrastructure that converts attention into money. And when that infrastructure can be shut down from outside, power instantly evaporates. Pornhub demonstrated that even 4 billion monthly visits mean nothing without access to the financial system. That's the lesson no digital platform wants to admit. And it's exactly the one they all should understand.